In the video that has surfaced from a Romney campaign fundraiser, the candidate divides the country between those who pay federal income tax and those who do not. But it is not that simple. More than a quarter of Americans do not pay federal income tax, but still pay payroll taxes. In fact, according to the Tax Policy Center, only 18.1% of Americans pay zero federal income tax and zero federal payroll tax. But to Governor Romney's point, who are the 47% who don't pay federal income tax? 44% are elderly Americans who get tax credits. 30% are the working poor or those who get tax credits for their children. A little over 5% are students who get credits for school. And guess who else doesn't pay federal income tax? 3,000 high-income earners who brought in more than $2 million, but through deductions, paid no federal income tax at all. John, that's a very small handful of the American electorate, obviously. The irony, though, is not lost, of course. Mitt Romney doesn't need to care about these people because he, in all likelihood, may be one himself. But we wouldn't know because we don't have more than a year and a half of his federal tax returns. The irony of all of this is it gets Romney back on the tax question, which is not a comfortable place for him, as you know. When you were talking about earlier, this sort of being political suicide or politically not so expedient, to put it in milder terms, there's a great map out from the Tax Policy Center that shows the states with the top 10 non-taxpayers, and they're all red for a reason, because many of them are Republican strongholds. The blue states reflect those where there is the bottom percentage of non-payers, which is to say the fewest amount of folks who don't pay their taxes. Many of them are states that are either swing states or states that may go Democrat in this election cycle. So the question is, in terms of identity politics, when Mitt Romney says something like this, how does it play out in red states for him?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, I think the red states, really the deep red states, are going to vote for Romney regardless, and this is going to matter very much. There's a couple of those states that are identified as red, like Florida, is obviously a huge swing state and vastly important. And part of the thing when I say political suicide is, there are a lot of seniors in Florida who are going to fall into this category. And there are going to be a lot of Obama ads run in Florida over the course of the next 2 months that are going to take advantage of this video. And, it's a state that Mitt Romney's already behind by 5 points, a state he should win, a state he was faring relatively well in until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It makes his lift that much harder. He has such a narrow electoral college map to get to 270 that, he can't lose Florida. He can't lose Ohio.
Virginia's one of those
He can't lose Virginia.
States
there are none of these states that he can afford to lose. And by kind of straining with the Sisyphean metaphor, he just makes it harder for himself at every turn. It's not only does he not want to talk about taxes. Every day. When's the last time anybody can remember Mitt Romney winning a news cycle?
That's the point of my prolonged, windbaggy open to this show, which is...
It was beautiful. It was beautiful wind cooling all of us and soothing across the plains.
That's like a bad metaphor. We don't want to get too far into that metaphor. But
Sisyphus.
But let's go back to Sisyphus. This has been... You talked to the Romney campaign. This has been going on since July.
It's 50 days from Election Day, and we haven't spent a day in my memory, and now granted I'm addled, but
old.
In my memory, I can't remember the last day we spent talking about the failures of Barack Obama's economic stewardship. I can't remember the last day we did that, and that's the only message they have that wins, if there's any message that wins. And we're 50 days out, and we're going to spend the rest of this week talking about this. Yeah. And you pointed out at the very beginning, and then I'll shut up. It just escalates and elevates how important the debates are to the point where not just voters, but most of the Republican Party, if Barack Obama does not physically, for Republicans, if Barack Obama does not end up physically on his knees at the end of the first debate, most of the Republican Party is going to say, we're done.
It's a loss.
We're done. We'll move on. Let's focus on the Senate and the House because this is not a winnable race.
He has to arrive in a cape or a spaceship and exit in the other, one of the other.
Because that'll help with the weird thing.
Glenn, the narrative in terms of what John is talking about Team Obama and this being, this just sort of playing directly into their hands. There's some really interesting focus group footage that we have from C-SPAN where folks are asked about Mitt Romney, who, has been accused by the Obama campaign of having some sort of secret agenda for being an out-of-touch plutocrat. And, that narrative was sort of getting some legs and taking hold even before this week. Do we have that tape? Can we play a little bit of it? We do not have it right now. But this would seem to in every way cement that, insofar as here he is at a rich person's house talking specifically about policy, which is not something he ever really gets into. This happened before when he was talking about shutting down the Department of Education at a fundraiser. Right. But that the idea that only a few privileged individuals are privy to what Mitt Romney actually thinks, and what he thinks benefits only them.
I think we're really narrowing down the topics that Mitt Romney can talk about in public at this point, don't you? I mean, he doesn't talk about sports. He's not going to talk about policy.
Sports.
It just seems like in addition to sort of his narrow path to the Electoral College, it also seems like he doesn't have very much to say in general. And by the way, I think the worst thing about those two press conferences with Romney were the optics. He looks like he just lost his lunch money. I mean, there is a look of absolute distress in that man's face, and that is, I think, a huge issue that people pick up on.
But it's a distress that he got caught, not a distress that I said something I shouldn't have said, and that I think is equally as damning. And I think going back to the map, this goes to the point that, again, in those red states, right, that narrative of those people, and Democrats have asked themselves this question, right? In 2004, in the aftermath, we said, why are people voting against their self-interest when these are people who rely on the programs that we're the ones who fight for? And I got to tell you, Governor Dean himself made a great point, which is it's a sign of respect to go to people and ask for their vote. And essentially what Romney is saying is, I don't even have to care about those people. So not only, and he's also said, remember, time and again, he's talked about the freeloaders and people wanting free stuff. So clearly, in his mind, this is a meme. This is a narrative that this is part of his worldview.
The other thing is it undercuts him every single time he says something like this, which he did on a taped interview with Kelly and Michael, where he says, I'm going to be I'm going to be a president for all of America, and I want to help the people that need the most. So let's listen to what he said in his interview when he wasn't talking about Snooki and Honey Boo Boo.
23 million people are out of work or stop looking for work or underemployed. Half the kids coming out of college can't find work or work consistent with their degree. 47 million people on food stamps. And I know what it takes to get this economy going and to get people back to work, and I want to help people. That's why I'm running.
I want to help people, and that's why I'm running now. That was from before these tapes were released, these Mother Jones video footage. But it's hard to take any of it seriously.
Well, I think that's part of Mitt Romney's problem. He's particularly ill-suited for campaigning in this digital age. And the days when you could do really targeted messaging and say one thing to the crowd and another thing to the donors and another thing to the media and get away with it are ending. And that's not solely Mitt Romney's problem. And Barack Obama ran into this as well on the campaign trail in 2008. But if you think about it, it was one of Barack Obama's only unscripted gaffes over several years in the public eye. It happens repeatedly. Well, just let me finish. It just happens repeatedly, I think, to someone like Mitt Romney because there is more scripting going on and then there's more time off script. And so part of what he has to do is figure out who does he want to be, what is the core message he wants to give to everyone, and can he stick to it? And I think that's hard in an era where more and more of what you say pops off on Twitter or on a handheld device.
It's just a remarkably... the line that he is treading is so thin. It is so painfully apparent that he himself is not comfortable with speaking sort of in an open fashion to the American public.
But also, when President Obama in 2008 made the comment about people in Pennsylvania clinging to their guns and their religion, he was actually making the case for this is why we have to do a better job of reaching out to people and talking to people, because here's what happens. He wasn't saying, so we should blow them off, we're never going to get them, we don't have to care about them. So, I mean, granted, it was inartfully said, but I think the point he was driving at was a bit different than, so I'm never going to get those people, they're lazy, they're victims.
I think that you have to say two separate things about that point. It was not inartfully said. It was equally condescending and contemptuous of a certain group of people. The president paid a huge political price for it, lost Pennsylvania by 10 points, got creamed in West Virginia, lost in Indiana, had a sustained problem with white working class voters that is still a problem for him going forward, and that was a real problem. But to your point, to be specific, the interesting thing about that entire statement was what he was saying at the end, literally in that quote was, this is what I'm going to have to go and talk to those people.
That's right.
Some of them should support me, but they're not going to, and that's okay. I still got to go there and make my play for them, which is 180 degrees from what Romney was saying in the video, where he's saying these people aren't going to like me, and I forget it. They're written off. I don't care. The difference between the point we were making before. people, even people who are partisans, deep Democratic partisans or deep Republican partisans, I believe, they want a president who is trying to be the president for all America.
That's right.
It's not, they don't want nobody wants just a president for their party. They want a president who has a bigger vision than that. And it's the difference between those two gaps, which are both really revealing, really damaging, but one person trying to project that bigness and the desire to be the president of the whole country versus one who is slicing and dicing and writing off whole segments of the electorate. It's a very damaging thing.
Also, a lack of understanding of who those folks are.
Yes,
that he's
a
talking
fundamental misunderstanding of not only taxes, who pays them, but also the American Social Compact.